Good Wednesday morning.
Hey.
It's not Friday.
Yes, it is.
It's Wednesday.
Is it Wednesday? Okay.
Wednesday.
Wrong time, wrong place. See you in 2 days. No?
This is something different today. By the way, if you don't know who we are, my name is Darin Pope. This over here is Viktor Farcic, and we are the co-host of a podcast called DevOps Paradox, which, by the way, just came out this morning at 6 a.m. Eastern. Fake data rules the world. If you haven't watched it yet, watched it? Or, well, it wasn't video, but you could listen to it. But you can actually watch the still on YouTube if you wanted to. Doesn't matter. But anyway, usually on Fridays we do a live stream, but today we added in a new live stream for this week. We'll still be here Friday, unless something changes, or that's the plan. Things can change. But how did this stream come about, Viktor?
How did it come about? We talked, I'm not sure whether I think with Kostis, kind of like, hey, about random subjects, and it was, hey, why don't we do something together? And then we thought, hey, we cannot do something together without Anais, and we cannot do something together without Darin. So it turned out that we first figured out with whom we are going to do something, and then figured out what that something is. Actually, we didn't figure out yet what it is. We are going to figure it out as we go. I think that Kostis has an agenda.
You think
I
Kostis
might be
does? Well, there's Kostis.
Yes.
How are you doing, Kostis?
He's a planner.
Hello.
He knows things.
Yeah. I'm the planner. I have the agenda.
So okay. So people know who we are. Kostis, who are you?
So I'm Kostis. I work for Codefresh as a developer advocate for the last 3 years. And before that, I was a developer for 10 years. If it's interesting to you, I was a Java developer. I know not many people like Java. And today we're going to talk about developer advocates. So I'm one of the people that work this daily. Maybe I will share some more details later on.
Okay. And you said one other name, Viktor.
Anais. She's the queen of YouTube.
The queen of YouTube. Oh, that's a nice title.
We're being graced with Anais's presence today. So Anais,
you're welcome.
Your grace. Why don't you introduce yourself, Anais?
Hello. Anais. That's my name. And I feel a little bit like the black sheep here right now because my official title right now is Site Reliability Engineer at a company called Sivo Cloud, which provides Kubernetes services. And I've worked as developer advocate for several years, first in the blockchain space. And then about nearly a year ago, I transitioned to the DevOps space. And that's when I met Kostis and Viktor at a company called Codefresh. And fast forward, I started a challenge on my YouTube channel called 100 Days of Kubernetes, and I kind of can't get away from developer advocacy, so I'm still here talking about it.
Okay,
so have you been trying to get away from it?
I don't know. Maybe. I'm not sure. Maybe not. Maybe I'm pretending to, and I'm not actually.
It's addictive.
Prove
it's
it.
addictive.
Prove
Admit
it. Shut down.
It's addictive.
Prove it. No, prove it. Shut down your YouTube channel. Prove it.
Okay, we can see here who's actually doing. Now, Viktor does a lot of stuff on YouTube. And when he does his pre-recorded stuff, he's fine. But look at me and look at Anais and then look at Viktor and look at Kostis. Who looks at their camera?
Oh, that's
I
a good
look
catch.
at them. I look at them.
You don't look at the
you
screen,
guys.
you look at the camera. How many times have I had to tell you this?
Okay.
Okay.
So,
It's a bit weird though because you're talking literally to yourself if you're talking into the camera, right?
See, I come from a radio background, so I never saw anybody. I just always heard people. So to me, it's natural. It's like, oh, I just look at the lens. Okay, so let's stop talking and joking about cameras. What are we talking about? Because I don't have the agenda in front of me because I'm going to be pushing buttons.
I have the agenda.
Okay.
We are talking about how to be a developer advocate, who is a developer advocate, and why you, I mean the viewer, should become a developer advocate if you're thinking about it. That's the topic. And the first thing I have on the agenda is an explanation. Like, let's talk about who is a developer advocate, maybe what is the typical day what are the responsibilities and the expectations for this role, so that we are sure that everybody knows on the same page, because some people say developer advocate and they mean different things. So maybe we can give our own definition, like each one of us, if there is a definition. So maybe
there is a strong chance
Victor?
that whatever you define, I'm not going to agree with. So go ahead.
No, you can define. You can give your own definition, and then I can give my own definition, and then Anais can give her own definition. So Victor,
You already prepared. I need to improvise. So go.
Okay, let's put you on the spot now, Victor. Why do you identify yourself as a developer advocate? Why is that your job title?
That's a good one. I'm not sure. Why is that my job title? Yeah. I mean, because that's closest to what I do, I think. And I would split, kind of developer advocate, at least in my head, is a person who is doing public work one way or another that is very close to the product, very technical, and not really marketing oriented. Not that there is anything wrong with that. It's just a different type of work. And most of developer advocates, not most of them, but many of the people acting as developer advocates that I follow or admire, they're actually not developer advocates by calling profession. That's not their title. It's any engineer going to a conference talking about something, some product, is effectively doing at that moment the work of developer advocate, right? And ultimately, I think that if we do have a role of developer advocates, I think that role should be focused on not needing that role in the future. Like ideally, you should you should raise sufficiently the awareness of a product and build a strong enough community that there is no need for that anymore. Like a good example would be Docker captains, for example, right? At one moment, Docker, at the peak of its glory, was not doing. I'm not sure whether they had any developer advocates. Maybe the French guy whose name I forgot now. Doesn't matter. Most of the advocacy is being done by people that are not even employed at Docker. Think of it, community or people who just have shared interest in the product and are willing to be public about it.
So the end goal of developer advocacy is to outsource yourself.
Yes.
Into the community.
And then I can go and grow potatoes or something like that.
Okay.
No, I disagree. So I will give my own definition. So first of all, things, there is the official explanation and what happens in real life. So if you look at the official explanation, if you analyze the two words, advocate is you advocate for something, and a big question is who is the target and who is the source? Like you advocate for something, and do you advocate for the users, the product, the company? And then developer implies that you are technical. So if you look at the official title, if you ask me, it's somebody who works at the users or customers or prospects or community or whoever you want to talk about, and you advocate for them. So for the people, your focus is on the people. So the classic example is you go to the community, and if you hear the same question 100 times, it means that this question is important, and maybe you need to prepare a demo for this or write documentation or add it to the product. That's let's say the official way. But in practice, developer advocates might be between sales, conferences, technical blog posts, webinars, whatever. And some people actually may focus on one thing. So maybe you have a developer advocate that is just doing videos and nothing else. Is this advocacy? Maybe you have another person that is like a product owner or a product manager. So they listen to the people and they say, okay, let's add this feature. Is this a developer advocate? Maybe not. And I guess some people might have like a second title. So maybe they are doing something else, and developer advocacy is a part of their duties, and they are not 100% focused there. So if I wanted to give my own official definition, it's somebody who is there for the community. And unlike you, Victor, I think that you should always work with the community. So even, after, let's say, Docker is well known and everybody knows about Docker, you should still listen to the community and hear their problems, and always work with them, understand what they need, and then help them as you can. So maybe you need to change your product, or maybe you need to add documentation, but you should always listen to your community. And it's different if you work, let's say, as sales or as a developer. Maybe you don't have access to the community. Maybe you listen to some things and you don't understand what they mean because they are not in your area. You should always work with the community. That's my definition.
I would narrow it down to, independent of whether that's your job title or not, that anybody who's practicing developer advocacy is ultimately providing a link between external stakeholders who are not having a direct influence from within the company, and internal stakeholders, people who have an internal interest and influence. So let's assume we have a startup and we have a product person who actively goes out and engages with community members and users and customers. Whether that's an open source project, then it will be probably more community focused. If it's not an open source project, then it's probably more enterprise focused and customer focused. And in that case, this person would provide this internal link as well as the external input, right? And I would actually agree with Viktor that a huge goal of developer advocacy should be to find those super power users who go out and advocate for the company without actually getting paid and without actually being formally part of the company, since that will accelerate efforts, right?
Okay,
Yeah, the only difference, I would say, not necessarily advocate for the company, advocate for the project.
For the project,
not for the company.
Yeah, but for me, the important question is, Anais, you said you have communication between internal users, internal stakeholders, and external. So let's take an example where external users say, we need this feature right now. And internal users say, no, we're not going to implement this. Who do you support as a developer advocate? Or who should you support as a developer advocate?
I think your job is to stay neutral. Does that make sense? Yeah, to provide reasoning to the external world of why this decision has been made internally, and then also at the same time acknowledge their concerns, right? And provide alternatives if those alternatives exist, right? But I think as a developer advocate, your primary role should be to stay neutral. If your role is not, or like your expectations not to stay neutral, I think then we go more into developer evangelism and more of a sales marketing oriented communication versus developer advocacy. Like that's where I would draw the line between that. Like when we look, for example, at Viktor's channel, right? Viktor, you're completely neutral in most cases, true to your own opinions. And I think that makes you a good developer advocate in that case. If you wouldn't stay true to those opinions and you wouldn't stay neutral based on the information that you have, but you would be influenced by the stakeholders of the company, let's say, then you would be a worse developer advocate, in my opinion.
Actually,